So a little bit about Concensus Technologies. We started in 2006. Both my business partner and myself are former Novell employees. We're located here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've been a NetIQ development partner and a Novell Platinum partner for those 6 years. We're also a Google Apps reseller, and one of the demos that we'll be doing today is showing how you can actually hook in Novell's or NetIQ's cloud access to Google Apps. Some of you may know us as the folks who wrote the Google Apps driver for NetIQ's Identity Manager product. We're currently managing over 1.5 million users with that product. We have 18 employees in 6 different states. Okay. So how can Concensus Technologies help you? We do provide identity and access management consulting, professional IT services, anything around, the Novell line, Microsoft Windows, SUSE Linux. We also provide hosting and managed services for folks. We also do software and hardware procurement, backup and disaster recovery. Bring your own device has been pretty popular this year. And of course, we do Novell, NetIQ, and SUSE licensing. Okay. That's a little bit about Concensus and how we can help you. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Mike Weaver. That's just a little bit about Concensus. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Weaver, and Mike's going to talk about the architecture on the NetIQ Cloud Access Appliance. So Mike, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to hear us talk, and thanks to GroupLink for giving us the opportunity. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is what is cloud access, how does it work, and how might you use it in your environment. To first get into that, there's a little bit of lingo that probably needs definitions, and that's the software as a service, or SaaS. Then we'll talk about what the challenges are to an organization from SaaS and trying to integrate it, how the NetIQ Cloud Access product might help you solve some of these problems, what this product actually is, how can you use it, and how do you manage your users with it. We'll wrap up all that with a demo of a live system being set up and used, which Don will handle for you. So software as a service. If you'll flip the slide there, Don. Basically, it's one of those architecture terms that effectively refers to a software product or solution that is providing services to your people or to your team that you don't host or run yourself. By a service, it kind of means something like telephone service or phone service or cable TV. You're buying it on demand and as needed. Cloud, of course, means simply not in your data center or on the internet. Some good examples of software as a service would include the Google Apps products, Salesforce.com, Office 365. There are plenty out there, Concur, or some of the others that allow you to provide these human resources or travel or customer relationship management, email, calendar, and so forth without running the software yourself. You're just consuming it as a service. One of the challenges that these products bring to the table is that they generally require user provisioning and user management. Next slide, please. So what we run into is sometimes these things will spring up a bit like mushrooms. You'll have one business unit or one department that brings these up, and they just bypass your central IT management and provision users directly, either through self-service or whoever procured the service just goes ahead and creates accounts. There's often quite a bit of delay going through a request and approval process, often paper-based, before IT can provision and set up the access. Often there are multiple passwords. You need to remember your Concur account, you need to remember your Workday account, you need to remember your Salesforce account, or what have you. Often this ends up being handled through just simply setting the password to be the same as your internal credentials, which leaves you open to all sorts of risk. Plenty of organizations do not want to expose their internal credentials, which can give them undue risk exposure, which is often against their compliance regulations, to cloud providers of which they're only trusting that they're not going to expose their passwords. Finally, there's little to no reporting as who's using these services, how are they accessing it, who approved their access, and things like that. Often it's kind of nebulous. It's almost cloudy. So let's take a look at a potential solution for this, the NetIQ Cloud Access product. It provides a appliance-based solution that will solve this by allowing you to provision users into various cloud systems, provide secure single sign-on to these various cloud applications, allows you to provide secured access by using the appliance both on-site and off-site, depending on how you set it up. And it has a fairly rich auditing and reporting system built into it, so you can track usage, track approvals, track access, and things like that. Let's get a little bit more into detail on how this thing really works. It's kind of a mashup, let's be honest, between the Novell NetIQ Identity Manager product, the Access Manager product, as well as a fair amount of secret sauce marinated into it to provide a unified management interface, a better user-facing interface, and automation in terms of setting it up and configuring it. This is intended to be a rapid deployment, rapid return to value product with quick setup, quick response, quick utility. You should be able to have it unboxed, so to speak, and deployed and working within an hour is their goal. Necessarily, this reduces some of your configuration options. If you're looking for really detailed and feature-rich provisioning and SSO work, you're encouraged to look at the full products for IDM and Access Manager and related. This is a simplified view, rapid setup, rapid handling, pre-configured, easy, click, click, next type material. It provides role-based provisioning. From that perspective, we mean groups or defined internal roles into various SaaS applications with definable approvals for management teams, SAML-based single sign-on into these SaaS applications, various audit and reports, as well as mobile device support. Out of the box, it uses an external identity source via LDAP, secure LDAP. And the two sources that it supports out of the box are Active Directory and eDirectory. It allows full provisioning and single sign-on support for, right now, Google applications, Salesforce.com, and Office 365. There are a number of new connectors in the pipeline, and from what the team has been telling us, there's going to be continual updates as new products and new connectors are available as additional download packs. For single sign-on only, meaning it doesn't actually create users, but it does allow a secure pass-through authentication, there's 192 additional connectors available in a downloadable toolkit which you can add in, as well as the framework available to create some of your own. You can access all that stuff on netiq.com. Let's talk about a few of the usage scenarios that you might face. The most complicated one is the one that everybody has, right? You've got internal users that need to access the cloud-based resource and external users that are either traveling, working from home, or the very high-intensity executives that want to make sure that they can log into everything at 2 a.m. In this scenario, you have users accessing both from the internal network and from the outside, going through your load balancer and accessing your cloud access appliance. In these scenarios, the access appliance does need to be in the flow insofar as doing the authentication and when required, the provisioning, but it is not used in the flow for web access-based resources when you do web. It is in the flow if you're doing mobile devices and email proxying services, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. In this scenario, you will have access enabled to the cloud access through the load balancer, both externally through your firewall and internally. Next slide, please. For your internal case, you don't need to expose the cloud access product to the network, to the outside, except in a limited fashion to enable the SAML federation with the external provider. Next one. In the external-only scenario, you don't need to expose the environment to your internal network except for the LDAP access to your identity source. Otherwise, you can keep it safely firewalled off into the DMZ. You can also, if needs be, do a hybrid approach, but that's a little more complicated in terms of having some isolated for internal-only use and some externally isolated for external users. Next slide, please. So what is inside of this beastie? It is a soft appliance that runs on a VMware or vSphere hypervisor. And inside the box, we've got an isolated identity vault with an identity synchronization component. IDP is an identity provider for SAML federated authentication. A proxy service that supports not just HTTP, but SMTP, IMAP, and POP for supporting mobile devices. An auditing subsystem, which tracks all of the traffic that goes on and user accesses, approvals, and so forth. As well as a set of management tools, including a policy mapper, the appliance administrator, and business management tool set. So what this thing really does is it sits on your network, you plug it into your identity source, you do roles mappings where you say people that are in, say, these groups get these type of accesses and others get different accesses depending upon their group of roles. Or you can have it as a request and approval type environment. For the provisioning solutions, they will then get provisioned to the remote system. When this happens, the password is not synchronized from your local environment. Rather, a random password is created and stored in the local identity vault and set up into that system. The user does not know their password for the cloud service. They can only access it through the SSO solution provided in this product. This greatly reduces your risk of password exposure. That password is randomly generated and stored. It's only for that one service, for that one user. It's not shared with anything else. The user logs into the cloud access box through their web interface or via use of the proxy service, provides their corporate credentials, which then unlocks their cloud access credentials, single signs them into the cloud service, tracks and audits everything, hands off their browser to the cloud service, which then they carry about their business. They don't have to worry about managing the passwords, they don't have to worry about changing their passwords, or you don't have to worry about them compromising their presumably more secure local password by giving it to Google or giving it to one of these other cloud providers. For the case of the mobile device support, there's also POP, IMAP, and SMTP support where you actually point the device at the cloud access system for its email app configuration. And it goes through that to get to the remote system. So you still don't need to know the, for instance, the Google email password or the calendar sync or things like that. It's all handled through the proxy service built in. With the Android device, Google's also recently made it possible to do your Android device into your Google account through a federated authentication, which Cloud Access fully supports. Once you set that up, then you'll be having your full device integration with Google without ever having to actually know your Google account password. This is really handy if you're looking at doing Android devices for your staff and you don't want to expose these passwords or set an unmanaged password up into Google. Let's take a brief look at the network architecture that you may have for this. This is just one scenario where you would have a multiple node cloud access system sitting behind a layer 4 switch where the layer 4 will need to handle, if you're using it, the POP and IMAP and SMTP, possibly LDAP if you wish to put your identity source on a layer 4 switch or perhaps a different one, HTTP and HTTPS. The cloud access product is out of the box. It supports up to a 5-node cluster. Each node, from the testing that NetIQ has done, can support up to 30 logins per second, depending upon the virtual hardware, of course. they have found in their own usage, they've got this product running on their corporate site for their customers to use, and they find that they rarely see more than about 5 logins per second under normal load. So with 30 logins per second, with up to 5 nodes of clustering built into the product, you should be able to support most of the usage scenarios you have available. This is full active-active clustering where each one supports and fails over to each other one, and it's all built into the product. There's documentation and with it to show you how to set that up. You will need to, of course, make sure that the cloud access nodes have access to the software as a service application servers, which is all in the documentation, but then you allow access to your clients both internally and externally through your firewall. I hope that y'all add whatever questions you may have or concerns to the Q&A, and we'll address it at the end of it. But I think right now we're probably in pretty good shape to show you how it actually works. So you ready, Don? Let's segue over to the demo.
Sure. There's a demo. No, that's just a screenshot. I'd like to begin by describing the demo environment that we have here. I'm going to set up for you today to my local Active Directory domain here. I'm going to have the appliance already set up, and as Mike said, it is a virtual appliance and it is only supported on VMware at this time. So you have to have a ESX or a vSphere cluster set up already for the appliance. So it is available from download.netiq.com for you to download there. The appliance does take about 5 to 10 minutes to actually set up. So it's pretty easy to set up. I actually have it running on a VMware workstation here locally for us today. I am going to be in the situation, if I scroll back a couple slides here, Mike had an internal only. Okay, I am going to show you the internal only here. My identity source again is Active Directory. We don't have a load balancer here today. We're just going to be going out directly, and we'll be out to the cloud, and we're going to show Google Apps today. So let me quickly go over and we'll take a quick look at my Active Directory domain. My Active Directory domain here is a simple local Active Directory domain built on 2008 R2. And what you're going to see here is that I have created an AG4C. The product originally, if you guys didn't know, was originally shipped in the 1.0 version as Access Gateway for the Cloud. That was a Novell product. It was rebranded a NetIQ product in the 1.1 release and renamed Cloud Access. So if you catch me saying Access Gateway for the Cloud, that was the original release of the product. Okay. And I have a few users over here, Dan Marino, Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, Vince Lombardi, and I already have designated a cloud admin user. So those are the users that we have over here. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how Cloud Access will actually utilize roles in your organization. And really what that's going to mean is that we're going to provision users based upon group membership into different things over in the Google side of the house. For those of you who are kind of familiar with Identity Manager, this product is going to be very similar to using the advanced edition of Identity Manager. However, there's not going to be the configuration that you were accustomed to with the Identity and Access Manager product. This product is not intended to replace Identity Manager or Access Manager for that point for complete flexibility in your environment. But what this does is hit a lot of use cases and really simplifies the deployment of those types of products to provide, like Mike said, the single sign-on availability and account provisioning over to your systems that are hosted in the cloud, as well as providing some reporting. So that's a little bit about that. Let's switch over to our Google Apps domain and take a quick look at our Google Apps domain here. One thing that's going to be very important, this is the same with the Google driver in the NetIQ world on Identity Manager, is that you have to enable the provisioning API inside your domain before we can actually set that up. The other thing that we're going to set up today is the actual single sign-on page. And I wanted to go over here, if those of you that are familiar with single sign-on inside of Google Apps, there's obviously a bunch of different ways to do that. Of course, I'll have to log back into my account. This is the single sign-on page here, and you'll notice that the single sign-on is not turned on inside the domain right now. And those of you who are familiar, you typically have to have a certificate set up. You have to have a sign-in page URL, a sign-out page URL, so that when you're inside of Google Apps, when you hit your link to go to Google Apps, you'll actually be providing your credentials inside of your domain. And then, of course, on the sign-out page, the same thing. When you go to log out of the Google Apps site, you'll be logging yourself out of the Cloud Access Gateway. Okay, and the change password URL. One thing to mention, there is no change password feature in the NetIQ web access, or sorry, in the Cloud Access. I'm already thinking Cloud Access for the Gateway. At any rate, that's our Google Apps single sign-on settings. I'm going to move over to the organization and user settings here. You'll notice right now that I'm the only user in the root of consensus-test.com. That is the container where we're going to be placing users. So let's go take a look at Cloud Access for the Gateway. Appliance Manager here. Click to log in. Okay. When you first set up the appliance, after you set up the appliance, it's going to ask you to go ahead and it's going to ask you to configure your identity source. Your identity source is obviously going to be at either eDirectory in this case or Active Directory. On the back end, it's probably using an LDAP driver to be able to communicate to those systems. So if I go into configure, I just want to show you that we're actually using an administrator account in here, and we're actually giving it a search context, and that search context is that container that I am doing that. We do that to limit the users that are going to be synchronized over. So if you have a deep container structure, you can actually, select the root if you like, or you can get down into a little bit further deeper into your directory structure. We're also going to you also have the ability to select multiple servers in here if you want to have different identity sources that you're going to use to collect the data. Of course, you can set up for LDAP SSL. This one's obviously insecure at 389. If you're going to deploy this into your production environment, you certainly want to go to enable the LDAP SSL, get your certificate, and go to port 636. Just a little bit more about the appliance down here. As Mike mentioned about the clustering capabilities, you're able to have a 5-node cluster here. It is important that you set up each appliance basically on the same network if they're going to be in the same appliance. As far as configuration items are concerned, there's not a whole lot you can do. You can go into here and basically you're going to set up the IP address and the DNS settings. That's really the only settings that you have to do to get the appliance up and running on your network. And of course, you have to pick a host name and things like that. Other things that you can see here are the health of the system. And you are able to go ahead and look at the disk, access gateway, the connectors that you have in here. And right now we only have the Active Directory connector. We'll have the Google one here shortly. And of course, all the different settings that you can have under here for each driver that you're going to be using. All these different drivers are available that are pretty hidden under the covers. Okay. That's that. We're going to actually add the Google Apps driver where we talk about roles and policies. Okay. So you can see on the right side of the screen here that we actually have the different applications that we're going to connect to. In this case, we've got the Google Apps connector and the Salesforce connector. These are what come out of the box, but as Mike said, there's connectors to other systems. Those systems include ServiceNow, WebEx, Excelon, Zoho, and there's actually one for Access Manager, although I think that one is just a SSO type of connector.
That's a federation between the cloud access device and any existing NAM infrastructure you may have.
So if you wanted to provide a single sign-on into an Access Manager system, you would just utilize that connector. Okay. So I'm just going to drag this over. And you need to actually click Apply once you drag something over here to apply it to the panel. Then we're able to actually go in. We're actually able to configure this. Okay, we certainly need to have a name for our Google Apps connector. Then we're going to have the username that we're going to connect to. We're going to utilize my account. Oops, I got the wrong username in. This is our test domain, so I have to put in the correct user. Now I'm going to actually automatically configure the SSO settings so you can see how that works. And I'm also going to set up prompt users for an existing user account. I'm going to leave that checked off for the demo today. But what that does is actually allow you to prompt users for the account if you're going to, before you actually provision for that. So what's going to happen now is that we're going to connect up the Google Apps. Did I hit cancel by any chance there? I think I did. Click OK. Okay, now we're actually connected here. We just have to click Apply. And if we go back to our Google Apps domain, we'll probably notice that no users are provisioned yet. But if we go over to Domain Settings, User Settings, and set up Single Sign-On, it's not set yet. Oh. One other thing I'll mention while it's synchronizing is that if you do want to enable mobile access that Mike talked about, you do just have to check Enable Mobile Access, and then the nice mobile icon will show up there. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and click Apply again so that the mobile access is turned on. Let's go over to roles while we're waiting for things to sync. You will notice now that there is a Google Apps approver. And it's going to default to the admin here, but if you want to select a user in here where we could actually have an approval for accounts, if we want to set up approvers, we can actually set up approvers. Okay. We also have other roles in here, which include the appliance administrator and the compliance auditor. The compliance auditor is going to be able to only run the reports and not going to be able to make changes to policy or to roles. So the next thing we're going to do is, now that we have that, we're going to leave the Cloud Access admin set up there. We're going to go over to Policy. Uh-oh. This is the demo gods coming back to me. So it might be necessary to go to the Administrator's Console and address the node issues. So let's go back to our admin panel and find out why we are unhealthy. And it's probably going to be green by now. Show health. And probably, like I said, by the time we get over there, things will look just fine. Okay, close. I'm going to go back into policy to see if we can set the policies now. There we go. Over into Google Apps. It appears we're not getting our roles and everything from Google Apps yet. Let's hit the actual refresh button. You can see it's actually working here, down at the bottom here. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to load the authorizations from Google. And what that's really going to do is it's going to go out to Google Apps. It's going to search for all the groups that are over in Google. You'll notice on the left-hand side, though, that the Active Directory side of the house is just showing the groups that are in that container that was in our search context. So the Google Users container, the Grade 7 group membership, and the administration group. So once our authorizations are loaded up, we'll be able to actually do some mappings. And then our users will begin to be provisioned over to Google Apps. So we just have to give that a second. Okay, And you can see that the groups that are actually inside of the Google Apps side of the house, let me switch over there real quick and I'll show you the groups. Here's the groups that we have over here that are over there. And basically all that did was grabbed all the groups that are over there. We'll go back to the Appliance Manager here. And I do want to show you here that this is the actual Google Apps account. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to drag that over to the Google users here. And we're going to actually set this up. Now, if we actually want to have approval from the administrator and we want to require approval for somebody to be given a Google Apps account, we would actually go ahead and check that checkbox right there. And that would require, once somebody's actually added to that group in Active Directory, that user would then be synchronized, would not be synchronized over until the application owner approved it and came into the system to actually do the approval. I'm going to skip that step for the purposes of the demo today to try to keep things within the time frame that we have to present. So now that we actually have that, the Google users here, oops, I must not have applied that again. Okay, it is check marked over on the right. Now, one other thing that I can do is if I want a user that is put in the Google Users group in Active Directory to be a member of any group in Active Directory when I create them over there, I'm going to just put them on the defense team, and I'm going to just click a couple groups here. And now that I've done that, anytime that somebody gets actually put into that container, into that Google Users group, they'll automatically get added to that group. Now, if I go down to the next one here, Google Grade 7, I'm going to actually drag the Grade 7 container up to here, give this a membership as well. So what we're going to do now is we're basically going to add the mappings here. Then we're not going to require any approval at all for any of those. I'm going to do that. Okay. Click that again. Okay. All right. So let's try to provision a few users now that we've done this. Okay. We should now be able to go over to our admin here and see all our users are activated. And let's see if our users are actually provisioned over into Google by now. Not yet. That's check. We don't have any users in those groups. That's what I'm forgetting. We have to actually go over to put the users in the group now that we create. So we have a Google Users group here. I'm going to select members, add Joe. Whoops. I'm going to add everybody there to that group. Apply. Now that everybody's in that group and we've actually have that authorization set up and configured, we should be able to see, hopefully now, everybody over in Google. One thing to note, when you are provisioning users over into a Google or any cloud application, you are kind of at the mercy of the cloud provider. So depending on how high you're going to scale, it may take a while for those users to show up. But you did notice that I did create those users over into Google Apps. Once I added them to that container, they were authorized by that role once they got put in that group to be able to have that account created. And let's see if there's any group memberships that are in here. I'm not a member of any groups. Let's I think the authorization there. Okay, that didn't have any groups associated with it. This one, I think, is the one that has the groups associated with it. Yes. Okay, so we're going to add. Once we get that in here, you'll see that we are going to have people in the groups in those groups. So let's add somebody that group in Active Directory. I'm going to add these two folks to the group, click apply. Okay, so let's take a look at Dan Marino now over in Google. And he's not a member of any groups yet. Again, like I said, sometimes it'll take a while for those to show up. Let's go to the groups themselves. I think it was the grade 7. No, it wasn't the grade. It was defense. I added 2 quarterbacks to defense. And you can see now that these 2 members are members of those groups over in Google Apps. So that's how we synchronize users over into Google Apps. Hey, that kind of concludes my demo for today. I do want to take care of any questions that we have out there. So Amy, if you're still around, I'm not sure how to get to the questions inside of WebEx.
Okay, I actually have not seen any questions yet, but if anybody does have any questions, feel free to put those through on the chat or the Q&A. And you can access that just by hovering over on the top of your screen where it says Viewing Don DeRay's Desktop. Just hover up there, and then you can access the chat and Q&A from there. So we'll give it just a couple more minutes to see if we get any questions coming through.